Hey, friends and strangers. This is Chris over at Modern Fantastic. Happy Thursday, everybody, or whatever day you watch this. I am excited to talk about something that I recently observed, and it kind of focuses on a very hot topic author, novelist, short story writer, weird fiction writer, H.P. Lovecraft, and the successful movie Annihilation, which was a adaptation of a novel written by, or a trilogy of novels written by Jeff Vandermeer. Highly recommend reading that work. Anything by Jeff, honestly, the man's a brilliant man, and the world is a better place because he's in it. That being said, I'm talking about the movie Annihilation, not the book. And Annihilation has a lot of Lovecraftian work in it, Lovecraftian ideas and aspects. So I watched it recently. I love it. And it is something that kind of inspired me. Every time I watch that movie, it's inspiring to me. And those are the kind of movies I like to hold close to my chest and let everyone know about it. So we are talking, of course, about not of course. I mean, anyone who is not aware of Lovecraft as a writer, he has created a lot of very important aspects to our fantasy and our science fiction. He coined the term Arkham, which you might have recognized in the Batman, all of the Batman series and comics and movies and all that, where all of the criminally insane people go. Such as all the villains that Batman collects up and puts away. He also created the Necronomicon, which is a popularized artifact that's used in all sorts of Dungeons and Dragons and Army of Darkness, and all that kind of stuff. He has done a lot. He also created the Cthulhu mythos. I'm gonna be really quick on kind of the details on him. He had three different really major writing acts, I guess, in his life. He died when he was 46, so he died relatively young of cancer. I'll give a quick overview of him before I go too far into this. So first off, he was born in 1890, died in 1937. He was 46 years old. From correspondence and how he had the difficulty in school and how he had a penchant to draw in and be withdrawn. It was likely he was on the autism spectrum, though the word didn't exist during Lovecraft's life. The first penning of the word autism was in 1943. And he was likely also... I would say he was likely also asexual. Although he married, he never really initiated the act or anything like that. The reason why I say that is I think he is a lot more of a three-dimensional person than a lot of people were willing to kind of give him credit for. And he is also self-professed atheist, having asked his parents why God isn't also a myth when they told him Santa didn't exist. And he was 5 years old when he said that. Self-proclaimed atheist while also creating Cthulhu mythos. Try to fit all that stuff together. It's interesting. I also have to note, with a combination of culture, society, his obsession with science, and a need to understand evolution, Lovecraft was also incredibly racist. He had a firm belief of keeping a firm color line to preserve culture. Now, this kind of color line, what he's talking about, is not just white versus non-white or white versus black. He actually was an anglophile in the strictest of terms, meaning he believed in preserving English culture and English aristocracy and the ruling class, having governance like the ruling class of England. He felt like anyone fighting to make Germans more German, French more French was a laudable endeavor, and he supported it. And so, but nowadays, a lot of, and that was kind of back then a lot, that was a prevailing sentiment at the time. Nowadays, a lot of right-wing supremacists are co-opting his perspective on preserving white culture, which I find is disingenuous because Lovecraft didn't want to preserve white culture. He wanted to preserve English culture. And that's a differentiation that is very important, especially with the dialogue that's going on nowadays. I'm going to try to stay out of the politics, though. He, after later in his life during the Great Depression, this guy was poor his entire life. He supported socialism. He believed FDR's New Deal wasn't leftist enough. He wanted to create shorter work days, higher pay, solid retirement for people that are getting older, and retired, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't like he was just this, he wasn't he doesn't walk around espousing fascism his entire life. But anyway, it was important to him to understand the cataloging system, which again, I think kind of might come from that autism range, like that kind of need to make sense of everything socially. But anyway, again, I'm kind of digressing. I would be interested to see if Jeff Vandermeer, the original author of Annihilation, found inspiration from Lovecraft's work. I kind of feel like it's kind of a given, but I will not assume until he gives me a phone call or sends me a note on this video blog. Hey Jeff. No, I'm just kidding. Also of note, I've only read the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy, which is what Annihilation is. The movie is a conglomeration, I hear, of all three books. The movie does not follow the books in a linear fashion per se. It kind of takes pieces and bits and puts them all together. Notably missing from the movie is my favorite part of Annihilation. The book which is the Tower. It is absolutely fascinating, and it's weird, but it also like sends the main character into fits of madness. So it's also Lovecraftian in a similar way, but not in the way we are going to talk today. Of course, I am focusing on Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space, which is one of his more well-lauded works. The story surrounds a main character who's a surveyor for a new reservoir, where he is going into a valley, surveying the valley, checking to see how many people are there, population, all that kind of stuff, planning to fill the valley with water. And it's a kind of a precursor, because this valley that's being filled with water is the valley that's going to provide drinking water for Arkham, the town, which then descends into madness and later stories, Lovecraftian stories. And part of that madness is, of course, due to this meteor that the main character finds out about. There are, I'm going to say, 5 similarities between this book, the short story, and the Annihilation movie, and I will go through it. First of the 5 is a meteorite that fell in a well versus a meteorite that fell in the lighthouse. So the meteorite hit the well, 2 meteorites hit the well in the Lovecraftian work, and started changing the water. And that's a big deal, especially since the survey is set to fill the valley with drinking water. It changed the water. It made everything gross and nasty, and it made the water thick, and shapes were moving in it, and all that kind of stuff. And not only that, but it changed everything in the landscape. It changed everything. And in the movie, the meteorite hit the lighthouse, and that lighthouse is kind of this landmark on a big, mostly desolate, shady beach, or a sandy beach, that has all sorts of skeletons of the people that came before it. And it's very, I'm going to call it desolate, kind of blasted landscape. And so the meteorite kind of started this whole thing going. And in the Lovecraftian work, the characters took the meteorite, ran a whole bunch of tests on it. It did not react to much of anything. It kind of bonded with silicon. It dissolved glass beakers, but it also grew smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's assumed that this thing is seeping into the world in a way that we couldn't test for, until it disappeared completely. And it's assumed a second one hit the water because of the way the water changed. The premise of Annihilation starts with a cancer scientist, a cancer biologist that is a professor, and her husband that was gone missing from a military excursion or deployment. And it's very science-based. There's a lot of the people that go into Area X, which is where all this stuff's happening in the movie, the area that is being affected by the meteor in the movie, are all scientists. They are psychologists. They are biologists, and all sorts of different types of science people. So both the premises of the book and the movie kind of start from a place of science, which I think is important to note. And then next, we'll go into the Shimmer and the blasted landscape. So the Shimmer in the movie is this wall of shimmering, it looked like air, but that's the divide between non-mutating planet, and then mutating planet kind of shifted. So you walk through that shimmer, that wall of shimmer, and you're inside the shimmer, and it is a place of mutation. And that's in the movie, but in the book, it's considered a blasted landscape, blasted heath, or blasted landscape. And it's a circumference around that well that the meteorite hit near, that just everything inside of it is dead and turning to ash. It's a blasted landscape that really has everything kind of turned to ash. Everything's dead, but it wasn't always that way. So the third thing I want to compare the two to is the mutations in the plants and the animals. So in both the movie and the short story, everything is affected by the meteors. First off, in the book, in the short story, it hits inside a farm, and this farm is just, it's got everything you'd expect in a farm. It has a grove of apples and pears. It has horses and dogs and pigs and cats and chickens and all sorts of stuff. And of course crops, corn and whatnot. The first harvest season after this meteorite hits, the pears, it says, and I quote, "The pears and apples slowly ripened, and Nahum vowed that his orchards were prospering as never before. The fruit was growing to phenomenal size and unwanted gloss. They look spectacular. They're huge." Also of note is that when the main character started his survey, he said he noticed the trees outside the circumference of blasted heath. They were growing too thickly, and their trunks were too big for any healthy New England wood. So assuming that he is coming at this from a perspective of radiation and ruminating on the effects of radiation, Lovecraft showed that at first the radiation was like a nutrient, and then it kind of, the more people absorbed, the more the landscape absorbed, the more twisted and sick it became. And of note, "But with the ripening came a sore disappointment, for all of that gorgeous array of specious lusciousness, not one single jot was fit to eat. Into the fine flavor of the pears and apples had creeped a stealthy bitterness and sickishness, so that even the smallest of bites induced a lasting disgust." It made everything inedible, and the resulting harvests after that, it became worse and worse and worse until the trees were falling over and turning to ash, and the end result that the main character saw, kind of, it developed into that. And it didn't just affect the animals or the plants; it also affected the animals. For example, in that first season, the children were out hunting for animals, and they found a woodchuck. They said the proportion of its body seemed slightly altered in a queer way impossible to describe, while its face had taken on an expression which no one ever saw in a woodchuck before. Now I'm going to call that to mind, keep that in mind while I talk about the Annihilation Animals that we come across in the movie, where we come across an alligator with a nearly albino hide with like a rainbow sheen to it, and rows and rows of teeth like a shark, but alligators don't have those kind of teeth. Also, they came across a pair of deer that were mirroring each other, and one had antlers that were flowering. And thirdly, and most importantly, this is what I want to bring attention to, they came across a giant bear that had no flesh on its skull, and it was still alive, and it was hunting, and it was eating. And it's got that kind of mutation, alteration, weirdness to it. And of course, over time, again, all of the animals and everything, either they were smart enough and free enough to escape that circumference. The cats left real quick, and the dogs went nuts and left real quick. The horses wouldn't come close to their pen anymore. The chickens would, over the course of a day, would turn to ash and die. Pieces were breaking off of the pigs, and it's pretty brutal how quickly they die after drinking the water and being close to all this. Of course, the people that lived there also were affected. They slowly went mad. The mother went mad first, and they locked her in the attic. Again, this is a weird fiction, kind of got horror aspects to it. And this is kind of the Lovecraftian middle phase of his life, where the earlier phase was kind of dream symbolism and dream storytelling, and then there's the horror part, and then there's the elder gods part that everyone really knows him for. This is kind of in the middle there, the kind of transitioning into the elder gods area. 1927, he died 37, so it's pretty close to that really prolific time of his life. And so everyone just kind of turns to ash and die, and the whole family eventually passes on, and people are going, trying to figure out everything that they can about this and trying to fix it, and eventually they just have to discard it and leave it go. And the fourth of the 5 aspects I wanted to focus on is the shimmering air. And I mentioned earlier that Area X is considered the shimmer in the Annihilation movie, and in the Lovecraftian work, there's also a constant kind of commentary on refraction in the air, a rainbow effect, how the sunlight shifted through the air, especially like I know there's a creeping wrong. There was something wrong with the sunlight I saw above that miasmal brink in reference to the well, and it says that the rustics say the blight creeps an inch a year, so perhaps there is a kind of growth or nourishment even now. So they said that it is self-contained, and it is nourishing, and it's growing. Whatever the meteorite is growing, continues to grow in the Lovecraftian work about an inch a year, while in the Annihilation movie, the shimmer grows about a foot a year. So there's kind of a similarity there as well. And just that kind of feel of something wrong in the air or different or strange or exotic. Both of the movie and the book or the story kind of has that connection going on. Finally, I'm going to go back to the lighthouse and to an experience in the book that the police officers had near the end, kind of the climax of it. In the movie, there's where the meteorite hit the lighthouse is a giant hole. Giant meaning big enough for a person to squeeze into. And around that hole are these shifts in the sandstone that look like roots or like some kind of growth, even though it's an inanimate object and it's not alive. I mean, until now, everything that you kind of see in the movie is a mutation on living material. And as the main character is walking across the sand, the blasted landscape in the movie, she sees all these crystalline structures that are growing up like trees. So there's more to it in the movie and also in the story than just living creature mutations. I kind of speculated that the crystalline structures in the movie were based off of the thing living underneath the sand and using salt from the salt water to create semblance of trees. But I don't. That's a pure wild speculation. But anyway, when you're closest to the lighthouse, the mutations are in inanimate objects as well, and the same in the Color Out of Space. They're pursuing everything. Kind of glows by the end of the story. Everything kind of has this glow to it. And it says that there's a pillar of unknown color that flared suddenly stronger and began to weave itself into fantastic suggestions of shape, which each spectator later described differently. And with that it ran up and down the exposed corner posts, coruscated about the shelf and mantel, and infected the very doors and furniture. Meaning, everything inanimate inside this house that they were investigating was being shifted around and changed by something in the area. It's very similar. It has a very similar feel, at the very least, to what was going on in Annihilation. Anyway, those are the 5 things that I thought were interesting and were paralleled. If you guys have any ideas or questions or concerns or something I might have missed, please leave a note. Follow me. Let me know. And I'll try and follow you guys back as well. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, guys. Take care. Like what you see? Please like, follow, comment, do your thing. And as always, keep writing, my friends.